Hashta. Now, what we're talking about now is to lo yadana. We have no idea what the quality of the material destroyed was. And you want to mishal and shmeinim, you want him to pay back the very best stuff. And what about the general rule? Hamaitse mechaveira alav haraya. You cannot make a claim unless you can demonstrate what your claim is. So I said that trumps, but the hamotze chamechavero is a diraisa din. So it cannot. This is where I erred. They cannot make a takana to pay back the best when it's in violation of a pasuk, and so that explanation gets thrown out, and we have to try again. We're on the last line now of Mem Ches Amid Beis. Amar Rav Acha Rav Yaakov. Well, here's how it. Here's what we're talking about. Kigon shahoise idis denezik kiziburis damazik. We're talking about a case where the fellow who was damaged, the best property he has is no better than the worst property of the guy whose ox tore up his garden. So if you're trying to stack them up parallel, his idios is on the same level as the party who does the damage, his ziburis. Okay, and in that circumstance, Rabbi Shmuel Sover ben Nizach Shaiminan. Rabbi Shmuel says we consider the quality of the one who was damaged, and his idios is no better than the other guy's ziburis, and therefore the other guy can pay back with ziburis, because he's replacing on a par, perhaps a notch better than what the guy lost. Rabbi Akiva Sovar midamazik shaimenan, that no, we measure the value of the one who does the damage. And the takana is you pay back the best. What you destroyed in that instance would be irrelevant, because we don't want to cut you the slack of giving you ziburis because it's equivalent to his idios. So we measure it if the best that the guy damaged was damaged, then we give from the best of the guy who does the damage without regard to comparability. Okay, and that's the new effort now. My time at the Rebbe Shmuel, so we want to know what is the lie. Remember, what they're basically doing is taking the word sodehu and translating the he to be either the damagee or the damager. And we have to go look into that now. My time at the Rebbe Shmuel, what's the reasoning of Rebbe Shmuel? Nemra Soide, the pasuk says field, lamata, second time, and there it's talking about the paying of damages. The Nemra Soide lamaila, and there's the same word field the first time, where it's talking about what is damaged. Okay, ma so the amura lamaila tenizak. So he makes a gezerah shava, and he says obviously the first statement field is referring to the one who is damaged, and he makes a gezerah shava af. So the amura lamata tenizak. So when it says you pay back from with a field in land, if you don't have money, he's saying the equivalent value of the field of the one who was damaged because of the gezerah shava. They both have to be applied the same way. Okay, therefore, when it says the best field, it's talking about the best field the Nizak has. For Rabbi Akiva Savar, but Rabbi Akiva looks at the same pasuk. Meitiv Sedehu Yishalem. He says the simple shot is when you pay with land, you pay from your best land. Meitiv, the best, Sedehu of your land, Yishalem, you should pay. V'kom Yishalem, so therefore you pay from the best, who the damager, evaluating the damager's property. V'Rebbe Yishmael, okay. V'Rebbe Yishmael, Ahani Gezerah Shava, and Rebbe Yishmael would reply, but what about and this is Rebbe Akiva still talking. And if Rebbe Yishmael wants to make this Gezerah Shava, he can use that to teach the value of the other guy's field, but a hanikra, you have to read the simple pshat of the pasuk. You can't deviate. You can't use a drasha technique to alter. What's it? No, what's the phrase? Can't leave. Ain't pshuto. There's no. You do not deviate from the simple pshat. There's a memory like that. Ahani gezera shava b'kida amra. So the gezera shava is valid or is usable for the fact to try to prove up that the person who damaged can use lower quality land if it's the equivalent of the damage, the best land of the guy that was damaged, okay? Ahanikra, and the pasuk also teaches the islay demazik idias uziburis, that if the one who does the damage has different levels of quality of land, good land and lousy land, viziburis today lo shavat kedid ke'idias the nazik, and his worst land is not as good as the guy who he damaged best land. Tishalem he mimetiv. So in that case, he would have to pay back the best. So if this guy's ziburis is higher, this guy's idios is higher than the damager's ziburis, then he has to jump up to the best land. Okay, now we're going back to the brisa. Rabbi Akiva Omer lo b'hakasev ela legavos lenizikin min ha'idios. The point of the pasuk is to tell us that the guy who's damaged can collect from the damager's best land, called the chomer lehektish, and certainly when you're talking about temple stuff. So now Gemara is going to go into what did temple stuff do the damage? The temple own a bull. Did it do the damage? Did the normal person do damage to the temple's bull? What does this mean? And how much more so the temple? Okay, so ma kal v'chomer lehektish. What do we mean when we say how much more so temple property? Okay, ilema denagche Torah didan l'Torah dehektish. If we're talking about a hedyot ox gores a temple ox, and that you have to pay with superior land, if you don't have money, that can't be. Sure, Rachmana, pasuk specifically says, if your ox gores somebody, another person's ox, your buddy's ox. So how can you say a temple ox? Below shor shel hekdesh, the pasuk excludes a temple ox. So that can't be what we're talking about. Ella, so what we should have to try and explain here is La'aymer hare alai mana lebedek abayis. I owe the bedek abayis a sum of money. Okay? So what Rabbi Akiva is telling me The Asi Gizbor V'Shokil Me'idios. And I don't have the funds to redeem my pledge, to pay off my debt to the Beis Hamikdash. So the Gizbor has the right to take me to Beis Din and claim property, just like any other debt. Except when we read the Mishnah said a debtor, when a claimant of paying a debt only gets Beinunis. Here, Rabbi Akiva is saying the Gizber is different. The Beis Hamikdash is a special case, and they're entitled to get from your best property if you don't pay cash. Okay, but that doesn't work either. Lo yehe ela bal chov. The temple, bottom line, is no better than any other creditor. I owe Reuven $100, I have to give it to him. I owe Shuldus $100, I have to give it to them. They're on the same madrega. Okay, ubal chov dino beinanis. And the rule is that if you're using land to pay off a debt, it's always beinanis. If you want to say Kasava Rabbi Akiva Balchov Shoktil the Idius Kenizikin, if we want to try and say that Rabbi Akiva says that the creditor collects from the best land just the way a damaged party collects from the best land, Ikalamifra. Ignoring for a moment the Mishnah, we can upslug that notion. Ma balchov shechen yufa kocho benizikin. A balchov has actually more power in terms of collecting a debt. Number one, you can dispute the debt. Number two, if it's a tom, you only pay part of the debt. A debt is damages are harder to collect than debts, okay? And therefore, the debt has more oomph, more power. So, timer behektish, when we're talking, can you say the same thing about hektish? Shechen hura kaicho. When it comes to the temple collecting, it's actually weaker than damages. So Li'aylam, the Gemara says, here we're going to go back to another explanation that Rabbi Akiva gave. Li'aylam, the Nache Torah Didan L'Torah Dehektesh. No, we're going back to the idea that a private party's ox gored an ox that belonged to the Beis Hamikdash, to the for use to maybe to plow or to. It wasn't a korban; it was just an ox. Okay, the Rebbe Akiva Savar like Rebbe Shimon ben Menasya, and Rebbe Akiva's view is supported or supports the view of Reb Shimon ben Menasya, the Tanya, because we have a brisa. Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya Omer Shor Shel Hektesh Shenogach Shor Shel Hediot. If the temple's ox gets away from the Gizbor and goes and gores your ox and in the private party's ox, Potter. The temple has no obligation whatsoever. Temple does not have to pay your ox. Your ox was gored. Okay, v'shel hektesh noga shor shel hediot. But if the normal everyday guy, his ox gores the temple's ox, ben tamu ben mued, mishalem nezek shalem. He has to pay 100% of the value. Now we know that if my ox scores Reuven's ox, two individuals, the first two times the Torah cuts me some slack and I only have to pay half. It's only when my ox has a chazaka of being a gorer, and therefore I have greater than normal responsibility to restrain it, that's when I paid the full amount. But here he's saying that even the first time out, if your ox scores the temple's ox, you pay 100%. So that's what Rebbe. Now, if that's the case, then it makes sense since the temple has got more power to collect. That it makes some sense now to say that if you gore its ox, it always gets the idios, the best, okay? Because that's what it seems that the temple always gets the more. Okay, but if that's true, mamai the idios the nizik kiziburis the mazik pligi. So if that's the case, then when we look at the argument between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva, what they're arguing about is when the guy who's damaged, his best, well, that was damaged, is the same level as the worst of the guy who did the damage. Okay? Dilma de Kuli Alma b'denozik shaiminun. So we could avoid that question by saying maybe they both agree that you look only at the guy who was damaged. And that's how you evaluate what has to be paid. If my land is my best land is rocky farmland that's hard to farm, then all he has to pay is Ziburis and you avoid the argument. But of course, that's not true. But in any event, Vahacha, when we look at the Brisa, the Pelugta the Rebbe Shimon ben Menasya, the Rabbanon Kapligi. So maybe the difference, the dispute between Rebbe Akiva and Rebbe Yishmael is the same dispute as between Rebbe Nashi and the Rebbeim. Okay? Oh, the Rebbe Akiva Savar look at Rebbe Shimon ben Menasya, and Rebbe Akiva holds like Rebbe Shimon ben Menasya that the temple can always collect 100%. The Rebbe Yishmael Savar like a Rabbanan, and Rebbe Yishmael holds like the rabbis. Remember, we said they don't collect at all. So it's two very extreme positions. But Imkain, if that's the case, my love ba'kasiv. What do we do when Rebbe Akiva said the pasuk does not come to give you some weird, you could say Rishava stuff? Pasuk comes, you read the pasuk kipshuto, the way it's written. So now, how can Rebbe Akiva now make the leniency of payment to the temple that when, according to Reb Menashe, who he agrees with, the temple gets more than it would that would be entitled to if it's a regular person? But not only that, Omer Ravashi, what about what Ravashi said? Turn the page. Tanya Behedya, the Brisa specifically, explicitly states, Meitiv Sudehu, Meitiv Karma Yishale. From the pasuk, you pay the best of your field or the best of your vineyard. Okay, Meitiv Sudehu Shel Nezik, or Meitiv Karma Shel Nezik. You want to tell me it's the best of the one who was damaged and the best, and therefore you pay back the animal's damage with equivalent to his best? Okay, Divrei Rebbe Shmuel. That was Rebbe Shmuel's argument. You can't put those words in Rebbe Akiva's mouth. Rebbe Akiva has different viewpoint. Meitiv Sadehu Shel Mazik, Umeitiv Karmo Shel Mazik. He says, forget what was damaged. When it's your fault, your cow your bull did the damage, you pay from the best that you have. Now understand, you're not overpaying. If you're giving 20 acres of Ziburis, you would only give maybe 10 acres of Idios. But nonetheless, if you had a choice, you would rather have less great farmland than rocky, more rocky farmland. We have to dig out all the rocks and stuff. Okay. So now we're going back to the Mishnah and we're looking at this business of the best, etc. Ravina Aimer Li'ailam, the fact of the matter is, Mas Nisan Rabbi Akiva he. The simple understanding of the Mishnah is that it's expressing Rabbi Akiva's point of view. The Omer Midiraisa B'demazik Shaiminan, that the pasuk simply says, don't chachmi any chachmas. Pasuk says the guy who does the damage, if he can't give cash, gives from his best land. Okay? Rabbi Shimon he, and it also happens to agree with Rabbi Shimon. The Darish time of the Crow, when he explains the meaning of this pasuk, Umatam Ka'omer, he says that the damages also come from the best. He does not mean, remember we discussed at the beginning, where does the Tikkun Olam, how far up into the Mishnah does the Tikkun Olam idea go? Are the whole Mishnah Takanas, or is part of it the Raises and only the latter part of the Mishnah Takanas? Here, he's saying, Matam Kaimer, all that the Resha of the Mishnah is doing is explaining the pasuk. It is not a chidush or a takanas rabbana. So now, if that's the case, my tam hanis anazik and shaman lahen be'idios. Why does we want to ask? Why does the Torah say you have to give from the best? So yes, it could be a gezerah, but you could view it as I owe you money because I damaged. It's a plain, I'm a barchov. I owe you money and I should pay idios. But the Torah wants people to watch their animals better. The Torah wants people to be able to take a walk on the sidewalk without fear of being gored. The Torah wants people to be able to plant a vegetable garden without making a 50-foot fence around it. So the Torah says, if you own an ox, you're responsible for your ox, and that's the Bnei Tikkun Olam. Okay, to Sanya, we have another brisa. Omer of Shimon Mipnei Ma Amru Hanizikin Shamin Lehen Be'idios. This is Reb Shimon who agrees. We just saw with Rabbi Akiva. Why do the rabbis say that if your ox gores someone else or damages his property, we assess from we evaluate what the real loss was, and then we take it from the idios of the damager. In other words, what's the Tikkun Olam? I said a big wall. But the Gemara has another more interesting reason. Okay, the reason the Gemara brings is mipnei hagazlanim or mipnei hamasonim. There were people who confiscated other people's land. We learned the other day about the case where somebody confiscated land and actually sold it, and then the original owner tried to get it back. People confiscate other people's property, or people who are more powerful than other people come and say, I'll give you your money for your land, but I don't want to hear that you don't want to sell it. You're going to sell it to me. That's the deal. And you're powerless to fight him. So you're getting your money, but you're not a happy camper. You would not have sold it voluntarily for even more money. Okay. So what would happen over here? This Gazlan or this Hamsin, a violent person would say, Lama ani gezel, the lama ani chaimes. What benefit it'll be to me eventually if I steal it or if I extort it? Lamachar, at some point in the future, Bezdin, Yordin Nechose, the Bezdin will be trying a case against me, and I'm going to have and they're going to come and they're going to take my property away from me. V'notlin so the nooshali, and they'll take the field I like best. Okay? And the Simon al Masha of the Torah, and they'll rely on a pasuk. Metiv Sadehu, Metiv Karmo, Yeshalem, you're gonna have to pay back from the very best field or the very best vineyard you have. Lefika Amru, therefore they'll say to themselves, and then the Bezdin will say, Hanizikan Shaman Lehen, the idiots that they evaluate from my very best field. So here the Gemara is saying that it will smooth out interpersonal relationships. People will be afraid to extort from you because what comes around goes around comes around. All right, Ad Khan. So okay. So if we see that it's a good idea to make a person who can't pay cash pay from the very best he has, so why does the Mishnah say that a normal debt, I owe Reuven $100, I don't have the money, Reuven can take my living room from my apartment, Lav Dafka, my better field, okay? Why didn't they just give him idiots? Today, Shalo Yira Adam Lachavera Sada No'av Vidira No'av. So a man won't walk by and say, what a beautiful house you have. I would love to have that house. Or what about beautiful field you have? I would love to have that field. So he says to himself, he's not going to steal. This isn't, Lo Sachmad is a technical means. I don't want a house, if it's a development where all the houses are identical. Lo Sachmad means I don't want to buy the house down the block that's identical to your house. I want to buy your house, Lahachas. Okay? I don't want a Cadillac convertible. I want the pink Cadillac convertible you won for getting the answer wrong.
What about Aishas Rayadcha?
Well, I don't want your wife. I want his wife. All right. Okay. So the guy is going to say, I have a brilliant idea. I'll lend this guy money on terms he can't refuse. And I know he won't be able to pay me back. And then I'll legally be able to get his best house. Okay, that's what it says. V'yomer, ekpots, v'alvenu kidei, she'agbenu b'chayvi. In other words, I'll give him money on a wonderful terms, but then when he can't pay it back, I'll claim his best field or his beautiful house. So therefore, lefikach amru balchav bebeinanis. So therefore, to equalize the relationship between the lender and the borrower, they say you pay back from average. If you can't pay cash, you pay back average land. Elamiyata, but according to this lotion, Yehavin is a busy buris. So if you don't want lenders to take advantage of borrowers, make the payback from the worst possible land that he has. Doesn't that do a better job of equalizing? No. Imkain, if that's what you say, Ata Noel Delis Mipnei Loivin, then that they would result in nobody making loans because you're locking the door. If I give up my good money that I could use to buy any land I want, and you give me back crappy swampland, then I'll never lend to you. And you'll lock down the, credit won't be given and you'll lock down the economy. Okay. So if all this is true, if the whole concept is to create reasonable balances, do we make the the damagor pay from the best because we want him to be especially responsible for his dangerous animal. We make lenders pay average because that's the best way to balance. So the Mishnah asks, what about the women? Remember, the Mishnah said women get from the crappy stuff. Okay? V'ksubas isha biziburis. A woman gets from the worst land if the husband doesn't have money to pay her. Rabbi Yehuda, that was Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, but he stated in the Mishnah as a Tanakama. Rabbi Meir Aimer, and he was stated in his name in the Mishnah, Bebenonis, and I made the joke that he was a proto-feminist, that they get average. Omer Reb Shimon mitnei ma amru ksubas isha biziburis. Considering this business of equity that the Mishnah is trying to establish, why do they give women from the worst? Okay? Sheyoser mimesha ha'ish rotze lisa ha'isha rotze linose. That if you take a survey, women want to get married more than men want to get married. So we have to make it incentive to men to marry the women. And the women are willing to accept ziburis because they'll do almost anything to get married. And the men will be more likely to marry if the woman can't hold a cudgel over his head. I'm going to take your good stuff. So we give her ziburis. Okay? Next comment. There's more to it. They're going to give us a couple of reasons. Davar acher, another possibility. Icha yotza al ritzaina v'shalol ritzaina. This is going to need explanation. A woman can get out of the marriage willingly or unwillingly. She can, all right. Or ba'aish einu maitzi ela l'ritzaina. So we would look at that. He can get on. The only way you can make him leave a marriage is if he wants to. So if we look at it with our modern sensibility, it should be she gets better land. He can throw her out. And what does it mean that she can get out of the marriage because she wants out of the marriage? So the Gemara is going to, so my davar acher, what does that mean? Itim tzaki heichi dechi mafik lo ahu. When the man divorces her for little or no reason, the Gemara says he can divorce her because of bad breath. If you can divorce your woman without any real cause, if there's no fault divorce on the man's side, takinu la rabbanan ksuba mimene, and the rabbis impose on him this forced pay her off rule. Kinafka ahi, if she goes out, and now this is what this means. If your wife is unhappy with you, despite the fact that she can't demand a divorce, she can make your life so miserable that you'll beg her to take the divorce, especially nowadays when Reb Gershon says she has to agree. At least in those days, if the woman was so horrendous to him, he could just dump her. Now you got to get her permission. But and the Gemara has replete with such stories. There's a story about the husband says, I'd like beans for dinner, and she gives him oatmeal. And then he says, I want oatmeal for dinner, she gives him beans. So she cannot be, dinner could be late. She could, honey, I have a headache. She's got 100 ways to make his life miserable. That's why the best rule is you always have the last word, yes, dear. So if she leaves by provoking him into a divorce, then nami letakne le rabbanan ksuba mine. So think about it. if the woman has really all the power in the marriage and she can force situations, why didn't they make rules like we have today? If the woman's a high-powered lawyer today and the husband's a school teacher, she pays him alimony. Why didn't they do that then? You've got people marrying up. The poor guy marries the rich girl, the rich daughter, and now she makes his life miserable because she wants Chanel clothes and he buys her clothes in Old Navy. So why can't she pay him alimony? We don't do that. So we give her the ziburis as the equalizer. Tashma, let's look at this. Isha yotzal ritzayna shalol ritzayna. The woman can force a divorce if she's diligent enough at making his life miserable, or she could be divorced against her wishes if the husband simply wants a cute young blonde. But a man, the marriage can't be ended unless the man wants to do it. Efsher the mashehe lo begita. So he might say, okay, I'll rent your own apartment. I don't want to live with you anymore, but I'm holding up the get. And we know of women for many years, the husband unreasonably withholds the get. So after the Mashahale Begita, he could hold up the get. So as an incentive to get him to pay, we say it's not going to hurt you so much. He's going to take the swamp that you don't farm from anyway. All right. Subas Isha Biziburis. The Mishnah said clearly, unqualified, just straight out. If a woman doesn't get paid in cash, she gets paid in the least decent land. Amar Marzutra Bereda Reb Nachman. Reb Zutra qualifies it. Lo Amrin and Ella Biasame. Only a woman gets a kasuba under two conditions. One, the husband divorces her. Two, the husband dies. And the heirs to the estate are obligated to either pay her off immediately or pay her off by supporting her until the funds for the kasuba run out. Those are the choices, okay? So lo aman ela biyasame. This Mishnah rule that you thought was unqualified only applies if she wants cash on the barrelhead from the heirs. Okay? Avo minei didei bebeinanis. He says all this discussion we've had is beautiful and it's lovely, but it's all theoretical. Whether she wants out, she doesn't want out, whether he needs an incentive to marry. If he divorces her, she collects from Baininus because she's a creditor. Bottom line, a kasuba is an IOU. It's a conditional IOU. Under this condition and that condition, you can collect from me. So it's treated like any other debtor, and she collects Baininus. So miyasme. So why is it only applied to orphans? According to him, my arya kasuba isha. So why did they teach a kasuba? Remember the rest of the Mishnah. The Mishnah says a regular debtor collects from Baininus, but someone that is owed money from a dead man and his children have inherited, they only collect from Ziburis. That was the Mishnah. So if we're turning the wife into a regular creditor, meaning she gets from her husband Baininus and she gets from his heirs Ziburis, she's no different than a regular creditor. Why do you have to state her in the Mishnah at all? Why don't we just treat her as a regular creditor? Vaha Tanan, we learned, and nefri minichse yisaimim ela min haziburis. We learned that already in the Mishnah. Ella lav mine. Don't say that we're talking about that we're talking also about collecting from the husband. All right. So li'aylam miyasme. So we're going with this opinion that only orphans pay ziburis, husbands pay beinanis. Okay? Uksubas isha itzrichale. But we still need to single out a wife, a divorcee or a widow, and put her in the Mishnah. Why? Salkadaita Chamina, I might have thought, Mishum China Akilu Rabbanan Gabo, because of it. Literally, the Art Scroll translates it favor. What we're talking about is a woman is very happy with her marriage, and she wants to replicate it as soon as she can. She wants to, wait a month and then get married again, or 3 months she has to wait. So what she wants is she wants cash on the barrelhead. She doesn't want to be paid in installments for support money, because if she remarries, the support money ends. So she wants cash in the barrelhead, and she wants to be attractive to a new husband. She's not only a widow, she's a rich widow. So we don't want to give her the absolute best, or even the average, because we don't want to distort the fact that men have power over women. So we give her ziburis if she wants the money up front. And that's why, okay, Kamash Malan, that's why we tell you in the Mishnah, the woman who wants to get her money up front gets it from ziburis. Omer Rav. Rabbi says, Tashma, let's learn a proof to this. Rabbi Meir Omer, Ksuva Isha Bebeinanis. Rabbi Meir wants to equalize the relationship between husband and wife and give her Beinonis. Miman, who gets this money? How does she get this money? If you say she waits for her husband to die and collects it from his kids. Last Layla Rebbe Meir Hoditanan. Doesn't Reb Meir remember what he read in the Mishnah? And Nafra'im Menichse Yasaimim Ela Min Haziburis. That she's just a creditor. She's no better than anybody else. Why should she get better from the assignment than any other creditor could get from the assignment? Love Ella, love Mine. So Rebbe Meir is not talking about a divorcee. I'm sorry, is talking about a divorcee. He's not talking about a widow. He would agree a widow gets ziburis. Okay, Michlal, the Rabbanan Sevre Biziburis. So since Reb Meir is really talking about a divorce, then we can forget all this stuff about she gets even when it's a divorce, she gets worse when it's an orphan, because the inference is they don't agree with him. So if he says Beinanis, they can't mean Beinanis. They have to mean Ziburis, which is the wording of the Mishnah, and it's a low plug. Widow, divorcee, she gets the swamp. Okay? So, Miklal, the Rabbanan, Sabre, Ziburis. Gemaris is low. Nice analysis, but it's not right. Li'aylam meyasme. No, Reb Meir is speaking about orphans, and he does want to give her beinanis. Why? The shanik subas isha mishum china. Because the woman's kisuba is different than a regular debt because of china. We want to give her average land so that she will remarry, according to Reb Meir, and there won't be any miserable widows clogging up the Ezra's Nashim. They'll be home making, doling out, setting the table on Shabbos. All right. Amar Rava Toshma. Let's look further into. I'm sorry. Omar Abaya Toshma. Abaya says, let's look into this further. Ha nizakin shamin lehem be'idius. When the person is damaged and he's collecting land, we estimate the best land of the damager. Ubalchov Beinanis, and a normal creditor gets land if they can't pay their mortgage from average quality land. Vixubas Isha Biziburis, and the woman gets from the worst land. Meman, from who do you collect this? In other words, are we talking about both parties to this deal are both alive? If one's alive, the other's not, or they're both dead. There are various permutations here. Maman, who are we collecting from? We've been talking about orphans. Maybe the whole Mishnah is always talking about orphans. My Isha, why did they single out the kasuba of a woman? Afilu kol haninami, any debt, whether it's damages or it's loans or it's women, you always collect from the orphans the worst. The Mishnah said that. Afilu kol haninami, everything else also. Elo, we have to be talking about is lav mineh. We're not talking
about the orphans we're collecting from him.
About, right. Lav mineh, what we're talking about orphans collecting.
No, Elalav is not mineh from him.
Okay, it has to be the actual guy. He didn't die.
Right.
Okay. His wife didn't drive him that crazy. Rav Acha Bar Yaakov suggests Hachi b'mayaskinin, what we're actually talking about. Kagon, and this is like an interesting twist. Kagon Shana'asa Arev L'Nizike B'Nola Abal Chov B'Noi Uksuvas Kalosoi. We're talking about a youngish man who either owes damages or owes a kasuba, and he has neither land nor money. But his father steps in, and so don't worry about it, Boychiko, I'll cover it. His father becomes an orev, a guarantor of the son's obligation. Sure, I can be your guarantor, certainly your father, well, your father can't, but somebody young enough to have a father's father can. I do that all the time with my kids. They need to buy a car, I co-sign. That's a normal behavior, especially when your kids are learners. All right. So now what we're talking about, so now it's got a new slant. Now what we're talking about is if Shlomo damaged your property, David has to pay. Idiots. And if Shlomo borrowed money from you, David has to pay Beinanis. And if Shlomo's wife is divorced by him, David has to pay Ziburis. So all the rationales we've been discussing go out the window, and we will continue tomorrow. Or actually, Shimon will continue tomorrow. Welcome to our humble
place.
associate group.
Guy refused to give the get unless she gave him $25,000.
I understand. That's not abnormal.
And this is how it works today.
That guy wasn't a genius. I'll tell you what a genius did.
Yeah, sure.
A genius married his 11-year-old daughter to an unnamed party. Went to a Besdin in Brooklyn and said, I wish to make a declaration in Besdin that you certify. I married my daughter to an unnamed party. Now, he then went to his wife's father and said, if you give me a couple $100,000, I'll reveal the name of the husband so my little girl could get a get from him. And the father-in-law says, I'm not paying you a couple $100,000. You're a Russia. So 15, a friend of mine, Rabbi Ramanik, wrote a tshuva with about 20 reasons, that's be'erich, it wasn't literal, why this marriage was invalid. And he flew at his own expense to Eretz Yisrael. And Rav Elyashiv says, I like reasons 3, 5, 7, and 9. And Rav Wolbe liked reasons 4, 6, 10, and 12. But everybody in Israel, they didn't all have the same reasons because he packed it with reasons, but they all agreed the marriage is not called. Flash forward 12 years. What, 12 years, Ruth? 12 years. She's 21 years old. She makes a shidduch with a young man. Rabbi Ramanik gets this gorgeous, written on cloth, invitation to be Masada Kedushin at the wedding, with a first-class plane tickets and hotel rooms in the fanciest hotel in Montreal. So he's showing it to me, and he's all proud of himself. I said, don't be so proud of yourself. All these guys are afraid to be Masada Kedushin. They're sticking it with you.
Yeah. By the way, I know Rabbi Rama's son.
Yeah,